Most people think of prepping, the first thing that comes to mind is grabbing a bug out bag and rushing into the woods. Hollywood, TV shows, and even a lot of prepper guides push this idea of leaving home the second a crisis starts. It looks exciting in movies and it feels heroic, but in reality, it is one of the worst decisions you can make. Today, I want to explain why bugging out is almost always a bad idea, why staying put is usually the safer choice, and when bugging out really is necessary. By then, you'll understand why the fantasy of running to the wilderness almost never works out in real life. So, the myth of bugging out is powerful. It promises freedom, escape, and survival. People imagine hunting, fishing, setting up a camp, and living off the land. But the truth is, there is not enough land or game to support even a fraction of the people who think they will do this. National forests and wilderness areas cannot sustain millions of desperate, hungry families pouring out of cities. Fishing spots will be empty within days. Hunting grounds will be crowded with armed strangers. If you think you are going to survive long term in the wilderness with nothing more than a backpack and a few supplies, history shows you are setting yourself up for failure. Your home, on the other hand, is an asset. It's the strongest position you will ever have. You know the layout of your neighborhood, you know where to gather water, where your supplies are, and how to defend the area. You have a roof, walls, insulation, and hopefully a stockpile of food, water, and gear. Abandoning all of that for the unknown is dangerous. Prepping is about controlling risk, and leaving your house without a solid and secure destination multiplies your risks instantly. Now, let's talk about what actually happens on the road during a crisis. People think they will throw their bags in the car and drive off to safety. Reality looks very different. Highways and exits will be jammed with traffic. We saw it in Hurricane Katrina and California wildfires and in the evacuation in Kyiv. When people panic, roads freeze, cars run out of gas, tempers flare, and even if you do manage to get out of the city, you could face checkpoints, armed patrols, or even criminals waiting to ambush vehicles for their supplies or for their women. Once you are on the move, you are vulnerable in a way that you are not when you are inside your own fortified home. And if you're forced to move on foot, the problem gets worse. Most people can't carry more than 40 pounds for more than a few miles before exhaustion sets in. A bug out bag might hold 3 to 5 days of food and water if you packed it light. That is not survival, that is a short-term hike with an expiration date. Add in bad weather, sickness, injuries, or children, and suddenly bugging out becomes a nightmare. Walking with your life on your back while watching your family suffer is not survival, it is desperation. The bug out bag itself is overhyped. Preppers are sold on the idea that if they just buy the right bag and fill it with gadgets, they will be ready for anything. The truth is that a bag is just a short-term survival kit. It does not replace your home, your food storage, your water supply, or your security. It buys you time, nothing more. Unless you have a stocked bug out location waiting for you, the bag is just a bridge to nowhere. Now, to be fair, there are situations where bugging out makes sense. If your house is on fire or flooding, you have to leave. If there is a chemical spill, a radiation leak, or government order to evacuate your area, you may have no choice. If violent gangs or looters are literally targeting your street, then leaving could save your life. But here's the key. Bugging out should never be your first plan. It should be your backup plan for when staying put is no longer possible. And if you do have to leave, you should not be running blindly into the woods. You should have a pre-planned, stocked, and defensible location that you can get to. Maybe it's a cabin, maybe it's a family farm, or maybe it is a friend's place outside the city. The difference between life and death is whether that location is already set up with supplies and defenses before you even ever need it. Bugging in or staying put is almost always the better strategy. This is where you should be investing most of your prepping energy, in my opinion. Store water, stockpile food, set up backups for light and power, and harden your home against intruders. Get to know your neighbors because communities survive better than lone individuals. Learn how to cook without power, how to purify water, and how to defend your house quietly without drawing attention. If you have kids or elderly family, you are much safer keeping them in the stability of a home rather than dragging them out into the uncertainty of a refugee path. We can look at history for proof, and history is not kind to the bug out fantasy. In Bosnia during the 1990s, the brutal civil war forced hundreds of thousands of people to leave their homes. Many of them ended up in refugee camps, and the conditions in those camps were horrific. People were crammed together, diseases spread quickly, food was scarce, and families had no control over their safety. They were at the mercy of aid agencies, corrupt officials, and even criminal groups. On the other hand, those who managed to stay in secured apartments or houses with stockpiled food, clean water, and a way to defend themselves often had a much higher chance of survival. They had privacy, they had control, and they had dignity. and even in the middle of chaos. The difference wasn't bravery or luck, it was preparation and the ability to stay put. So in Argentina, during the collapse of 2001, the same lesson repeated itself in a different way. When the banks froze accounts and the economy collapsed, millions of people faced unemployment and skyrocketing prices. Many who tried to flee into the streets in search of something better quickly found themselves in dangerous situations, homeless, broke, and vulnerable to crime. Meanwhile, families that stayed in their homes held onto their property and learned how to barter with their neighbors for food, tools, and basic goods had a huge advantage. They created small networks of survival right where they were. Their homes became their base of operations, while the ones who abandoned theirs lost everything. Argentina showed that even in a modern urban collapse, survival belongs to those who can adapt and hold ground, not those who run out without a plan. Another thing I want to cover before we move on is securing your home, because this is something a lot of preppers overlook. People spend thousands of dollars on food, water, and gear, but if your house is not fortified, then all of that can be taken away from you in a matter of minutes. Your home is your stronghold, and you need to think about it that way. Let's start with your doors. The reality is that most break-ins don't happen because a thief is a genius. They happen because doors are weak. A cheap lock and a wooden frame can be kicked in with one good hit. That is why you should invest in heavy-duty door security bars. These braces lock under the doorknob and wedge against the floor so that even if someone kicks or rams your door, it won't budge. They're simple, affordable, and give you a massive upgrade in security. I've talked about them a few times. Next are your windows. Glass is always the weak point of a home. Anyone can break it, but there are films you can apply to your windows that make them shatter resistant. They're on Amazon. Even if someone smashes the glass, the film holds the pieces together, forcing them to hit it again and again and giving you precious time to respond. It doesn't make your windows bulletproof, but it does make them much harder to get through, and in a crisis, slowing down an intruder can mean survival. Now let's talk about your backyard glass doors or patio doors, which are some of the most common entry points. You can buy retractable security gates that slide across and lock into place. These are steel barriers that cover the glass door, and when they're locked, it's almost impossible for someone to force their way through. If you don't have those, even a simple bar in the track can stop the door from being forced open, but a security gate is a far stronger option. You usually have to get those installed by a professional. Cameras and alarms are another layer you should not ignore. Your regular home alarm system will probably work in the early stages of a crisis when the grid is still up. It's not perfect, but even the sound of an alarm is enough to scare away intruders who are looking for an easy target. Security cameras also play a role, even if you don't care about recording. Just having visible cameras can be a deterrent. If you use a system with a backup battery power, it will keep working even when the power is out. Then there are driveway alarms. I talked about these before. These are small sensors you can put at the edge of your property that alert you when someone crosses. The best part is that many of them run on batteries or small solar panels, so they work off-grid. If you live in a suburban or rural home, this can give you an early warning if someone is coming long before they reach your door, which is ideal. Solar motion sensor lights are another simple but powerful upgrade. Darkness is the friend of the intruder and light is the enemy. When someone approaches your house and a light suddenly flashes on, most criminals second guess themselves. These lights run off solar, which means you don't need the grid to keep them working. Place them near entry points, driveways, and all over your backyard, which is what I did. The key to fortification is layers. No single measure will protect your home forever, but each one adds time, noise, and resistance. You want intruders to look at your home and realize it is not worth the effort. They will move on to an easier target. Your goal is not to build an impenetrable fortress, but to buy time and create a deterrence. So now that we're done with that part, we're going to go back to historical examples, and we're going to talk about Ukraine. So in Ukraine, we've seen this lesson unfold in real time. When the first waves of war began, millions fled in panic to other countries. Many of those early refugees thought they were escaping to safety, but what they found instead were overcrowded shelters, lack of work, foreign laws they didn't understand, and an uncertain future. Families were separated, children were uprooted, and people became dependent on charity for every single meal, basically. Compare that to those who stayed in their homes, especially those who were in areas that weren't under direct bombardment. If they had food storage, water, alternate heat sources, and a network of neighbors to rely on, they endured the crisis with far more stability. Their lives were still hard, but they were not reduced to helpless refugees. Once again, the lesson is clear. Those who had the foresight to prepare and stay rooted often came out stronger than those who just left everything behind and gave up. So when you think about bugging out, remember, this is not a plan. It is a last resort. It is what you do when your house has been burned, when your neighborhood has become unlivable, or when there is truly no other option left. Bugging out should be treated as the final card you play, not the first move. 90% of the time, your best chance of survival is exactly where you already are. Your home represents shelter, supplies, community, and familiarity. Things you cannot replace with a backpack. Protect what you have, secure your home, and ride out the storm from a position of strength. Do not fall for the fantasy that you can disappear into the woods and live like a movie character all the time. That illusion has probably killed more people in real life than it has ever saved. Survival is not about escape, it is about preparation, discipline, and resilience right where you stand. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. Let me know what your opinions are about bugging out versus staying in. I generally think in 90% of cases the best thing to do is just stay indoors. But if you have a different opinion, whether you agree with me or you disagree with me, let me know down below. And I'd like to read the comments about that. But yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe.